"You're jolly good," said Julian, admiringly. "It's a pity Anne isn't a bit better." "Anne, you'll have to practice your swimming strokes hard, or you'll never be able to swim out as far as we do." They were all very hungry at lunchtime. They went back up the cliff path, hoping there would be lots to eat, and there was. Cold meat and salad, plum pie and custard, and cheese afterwards. How the children tucked in. "What are you going to do this afternoon?" asked George's mother. "George is going to take us out in a boat to see the wreck on the other side of the island," said Anne. Her aunt looked most surprised. "George is going to take you," she said. "Why, George, what's come over you? You've never taken a single person before, though I've asked you to dozens of times." George said nothing, but went on eating her plum pie. She hadn't said a word all through the meal. Her father had not appeared at the table, much to the children's relief. "Well, George, I must say I'm pleased that you want to try and do what your father said," began her mother again. But George shook her head. "I'm not doing it because I've got to," she said. "I'm doing it because I want to. I wouldn't have taken anyone to see my wreck, not even the Queen of England, if I didn't like them." Her mother laughed. "Well, it's good news that you like your cousins," she said. "I hope they like you." "Oh yes," said Anne, eagerly, anxious to stick up for her strange cousin. "We do like George, and we like tea." She was just about to say that they liked Timothy too, when she got such a kick on her ankle that she cried out in pain and the tears came into her eyes. George glared at her. "George? Why did you kick Anne like that when she was saying nice things about you?" cried her mother. "Leave the table at once. I won't have such behavior." George left the table without a word. She went out into the garden. She had just taken a piece of bread and cut herself some cheese. It was all left on her plate. The other three stared at it in distress. Anne was upset. How could she have been so silly as to forget she mustn't mention Tim? "Oh, please call George back," she said. "She didn't mean to kick me. It was an accident." But her aunt was very angry with George. "Finish your meal," she said to the others. I expect George will go into the sulks now. Dear, dear, she is such a difficult child. The others didn't mind about George going into the sulks. What they did mind was that George might refuse to take them to see the wreck now. They finished the meal in silence. Their aunt went to see if Uncle Quentin wanted any more pie. He was having his meal in the study by himself. As soon as she had gone out of the room, Anne picked up the bread and cheese from George's plate and went out into the garden. The boys didn't scold her. They knew that Anne's tongue very often ran away with her, but she always tried to make up for it afterwards. They thought it was very brave of her to go and find George. George was lying on her back under a big tree in the garden. Anne went up to her. "I'm sorry, I nearly made a mistake, George," she said. "Here's your bread and cheese. I've brought it for you. I promise I'll never forget not to mention Tim again." George sat up. "I've a good mind not to take you to see the wreck," she said. "Stupid baby." Anne's heart sank.